Hey, what's up, guys? How we doing? So today I want to talk a little bit about feel versus real when it comes to hitting mechanics. We've talked about this a little bit before in the past, but I wanted to hit on it again because I think it's really, really important. I think people get confused with it, and you'll see a lot of times, typically major leaguers will say that they're doing one thing, and then their swing looks like they're doing something else. And so it's really important to separate the thought process from what's actually occurring in the swing. And this is the same, no, it's not just with baseball swings, but it can be pitching mechanics or running mechanics or defensive mechanics, or it can be any sport. It really doesn't matter. But what the player feels like he's doing or what the thought process is behind the movement isn't always what's actually occurring. So this is kind of how I handle it. And I think it's really important because like I said, if you talk to most major league players, let's just, again, take hitters, for example. If you ask most major league hitters what they're trying to do in their swing, they'll tell you one thing, and it could be the exact opposite of what is actually occurring in the swing when you play it back on video. But the point is that they're able to produce the swing because of what they're thinking. And even if they're thinking, even if they're not thinking, let's just say for a bat path to be flatter through the zone that we talk about, they might think, and most of them do, many of them do, maybe 99% of them think to swing down on the ball, really swing down on the ball. And then you watch their swing, and it doesn't look like they're swinging down on the ball. It looks like they're actually swinging up on the ball. So it's important first, I think, that when you're listening to someone talk about hitting, to understand that typically what they're talking about is what they feel or what their thought process is. It isn't really about what's actually occurring. So again, if you're listening to hitters talk about swinging down on the ball, swing down on the ball, they probably don't physically swing down on the ball, but they're thinking swing down on the ball. So you can, as a hitter, try to think swing down on the ball. But it's important, and why I think videotaping is important is because feel and real aren't always the same thing, and your thought process doesn't always turn out to be what you're actually thinking about. And sometimes it does. So sometimes there'll be guys, younger kids that are taught to swing down on the ball, down on the ball. And what do they think in their mind? Their thought process is swing down on the ball. And when they swing, they actually swing down on the ball to where they slice through the ball. They pop the ball up or they smother the ball into the ground because their bat is being it's really steep downhill. It's being pushed to the ball. And so they end up not being successful because their bat doesn't stay on the proper plane. And they don't know what's going on. They're saying, I'm swinging down, I'm thinking swing down on the ball just like every other major league player thinks, but I'm not having results. Well, it's because you may be thinking swing down on the ball like they are, but the swing that is being produced by your thought process is an actual swing down on the ball. And instead of like the major league guys, when they think swing down on the ball, most of them actually end up having a pretty flat bat path. Now, I think the swing down on the ball, keeping the barrel above the ball for a little bit, the barrel eventually gets to the point where it's going to be flatter and actually might even get below the ball a little bit. But it happens basically as it's coming through the zone. So that first initial move of keeping the barrel above the ball for a little bit longer, yeah, that happens in most major league hitters. And that thought process of swinging down on the ball probably helps a lot of those guys keep the barrel above the ball for a little bit until they actually get up into the contact area and they're coming through the zone. But again, you have to make sure that you understand what your thought process is, but what is actually happening in the swing. And so you probably wouldn't tell many players, again, I wouldn't tell many players to swing up on the ball because a lot of times when you tell a player to swing up on the ball, what do? They collapse back and their barrel gets below the ball really early and they swing straight uphill, which isn't good either. But if I have a player that is really steep on the ball and they swing straight down and they slice and they smother, well, then I'll probably start by telling them to think in their mind, have a thought process of swinging flat to the ball, stay flat through the ball. And I'll see what that does, what that thought process translates into as far as physical, actual swing mechanics. And I'll see if there's a difference when I change what they're thinking about. And maybe I'll notice a little bit of difference. Maybe it'll match up perfectly with exactly what I want the actual mechanics to be like. And we'll say, okay, for now on, I want you to think to swing flat through the ball. There's some guys that will still swing down. And so I'll have to say, hey man, think about swinging up on the ball. Think about hitting the ball at the top of the cage up there. Think about swinging up. And then all of a sudden they start swinging flat through the ball. And then I can say, okay, that thought process that you had, I want you to stick with that thought process because it's translating into a bat path, into swing mechanics that you will match up to what most major league guys do. Now, the same thing can be said on the other side. So maybe I have a kid that does collapse back early and his barrel really drops and he's swinging way too uphill. Well, then maybe I can try to say, hey man, think about swinging down on the ball a little bit. I typically don't say that because I don't want a guy to physically swing down on the ball, but I might say, hey, think about staying above the ball, swing down on the ball. Usually what I'll say is think about keeping the barrel above the ball a little longer. But you can try to say, hey, swing down on the ball here. And maybe that thought process of swinging down on the ball translates into not so much of a collapse back where the barrel drops too early below the ball, but maybe that thought process keeps the barrel above the ball a little bit longer, and now they're a little bit flatter through the zone, and it's a bat path that you want to replicate or duplicate. And so, boom, there's your thought process. That's what I want you to think about. So it's really important to just make sure that you keep in mind that feel and real are not always the same. Thought process and actual swing mechanics are not always the same. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And so for me, as a hitting coach, when I'm talking to guys, I need to understand what the player's thought process is. What are they trying to do? I don't just care about what they're doing. I need to know, yes, what they're doing, but what are they trying to do? What's their thought process? And if the thought process and what's actually happening are not in sync, then I can delve deeper into it. If the swing mechanic and the bat path is what I want, then I don't care what the player thinks. He can think that he's standing on his head and swinging with his feet. I really don't care if it's creating a bat path that is working and the mechanics are working and he's successful. You can think whatever you want. But if a player is thinking swing down on the ball and they are swinging down the ball, I need to know that because then I need to change his thought process to try to change his mechanics and vice versa. So hopefully that you guys understand where I'm coming from. I think there's a lot of questions and people always get into arguments about, well, I think this, well, that's fine. Or I do this. Well, yeah, I want the doing part to happen. But the thought process typically will affect what's actually happening in the swing. So you got to know both parts, what's happening and what's the thought process behind the swing. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, I guess it gets a little bit complicated trying to explain it. But if you have any questions, let me know. Share the video with all your friends. Comment in the section below. Like the channel, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will talk to you later.